Mr. Mayor, we're told that these police cuts are inevitable because of funding constraints, but would you agree that some of these are political choices rather than operational necessity, given that you could step in on some of these things?
No, in relation to the tough choices, what the Commissioner had to do was, in 25-26, find how he's going to save £260 million. And that's on top of the £1.1 billion he and the previous three commissioners have saved since 2010, £1.1 billion plus £260 million. As the Commissioner, it's important that he's the person in charge of where these savings are made. As the Commissioner very generously mentioned, we stepped in with additional funding after his original plans in relation to the savings required, which ameliorated some of the savings. We didn't dictate to the Commissioner how that additional money should be spent because he's got the expertise in terms of crime fighting and crime deterring, which I don't have, and so relied upon the Commissioner's expertise. Consequence of that is my manifesto promise to keep police station open in every borough 24 hours a day. On the Commissioner's advice, bearing in mind our consultation around the police and crime plan said the public wanted neighbourhood policing restored. I thought it was sound advice from the Commissioner to say actually this money is better spent boosting, and the Commissioner referred to the numbers, neighbourhood policing, rather than having a facility open that, in Pinner's case, is used 2 times a day. Other police front counters 4 or 5 times a day to report crime.
Thank you for that response. I would suggest that perhaps not enforcing the law as robustly as you can and you do have the powers for. This is a genocidal chant. It is an insightful chant, and under the Public Order Act, the legislation that we have, we don't need additional powers. You can, and in my view, and in the view of many of the people that I speak to, should be more robust, should be stepping in to a greater degree when that particular chant is given. And one of your predecessors, Sir John Stevens, commented last year that I don't know why there is a feeling there's not enough powers. There are enough powers. He believes that, I believe that, and I say lots of other people that I speak to do believe that. But perhaps maybe to help with what I regard as the mental gymnastics that have been involved in some of this discussion, it's worth looking at who in the past the Met has taken advice from on this matter. The likes of Atiq Malik, who, according to Lord Warney's report, was present in the operations room during some of those early protests in October 2023, despite having personally led this very chant at previous events. Mohammed Kosbar, on the record praising the founder of Hamas as the master of the martyrs of resistance, and having been photographed with the then leadership of Hamas a few years earlier. So I note that you have cut ties with those 2 individuals subsequently, but do you not agree that it was a terrible oversight in the first place to effectively be taking advice on those chants from people who themselves have had a track record of taking part and leading in those chants?
Your inference that we've taken advice on chants from those people is not accurate. We assess chants ourselves. We do engage with all communities in respect of our activities, but our independent operational decisions made under the law. When anything is marginal and contentious, and all the examples you've given are those, and there are many others, in some cases we've arrested and put a files to the CPS. In other cases we've asked for advice from CPS before making arrests. So we are using the law to the full force that it's available. And we are regularly...
I'm conscious of the time.
Let me finish. We're regularly criticised on both sides. So we're in the middle, refereeing tension in communities, and there are some on one side of the argument would say we overuse our powers, we're too assertive, we're unreasonable, and there are some on the other side of the argument who would say we're not assertive enough, we underuse our powers, and that's unreasonable. That's the reality. We are, without fear or favour, under the law, in the middle doing that. And if Parliament wants to change the law in terms of how protests are organised and police, that's fine. If Parliament wants to change the law in terms of making explicit phrases illegal, but at the moment, all the legal advice we have from King's Counsel and from CPS says that these offences aren't prosecutable. That doesn't mean I'm saying that many in communities don't find them offensive. All I'm saying is they're not prosecutable.
OK, I'm conscious of the time. As a quick kind of yes or no, do you feel regret that those members of the Jewish community that I speak to and others speak to do feel they have been let down by the way these protests have been policed, by the way these chants and these calls, which are calls for death to Jews, the way they've been dealt with?
If somebody calls explicitly for death to Jews, they will get arrested for that. So please do not infer that we've allowed...
Does that include Bob
Let
Dylan?
me finish. Please do not infer that we've allowed people to say that, because we haven't. So I do not
Commissioner, I'm out of time. I need to leave time for my colleague.
I do not like the fact that any community in London feels less safe than we would all want them to. That is deeply troubling. It's troubling that there are people on different sides of the argument trying to whip up sentiment in all sorts of, in both directions. We will keep bearing down on things that are against the law, that are hate crime, and we'll do it with all the force we can do. And we will be assertive in managing protest to balance the rights of the protesters with the disruption to the life of the community within the powers given to us by Parliament.
OK, I hope you do, because there is no other community in London that has been subject to such a level of relentless and persistent hate as the London Jewish community in the last 2 years. I have to finish there because I need to leave time for my colleague.
OK. Any other contributions on this particular question?
It's Marina's turn next.
Yeah. So if not, I'm going to bring in Assembly Member Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Good afternoon, Mr Mayor. Commissioner, while some of the front counter closures have been mitigated, there is still deep concern. Given that the police stations will still be open, how much will you realistically save, and how much are you ensuring that in the upcoming budget we will not face more cuts to front counters and other core policing commitments?
So, we said at the start of our budget process last autumn that we had a £260 million budget gap. Some of that was closed by additional funding from the Mayor and from the Home Office, but some of it remained, and we had a long list of tough choices which we assembled to balance that budget. As part of that, 7 million of those savings have come from front counters, and the plan that we're executing upon achieves that 7 million. On top of that, several thousand officer hours a year will be saved as well, where officers were backfilling within front counters. That's officer time taken out of policing communities, but the actual cash saving in terms of front counter time, largely staffed by police staff, is 7 million. We don't have plans to go further than the current changes. Clearly, all plans and all resources are subject to future budgets, but that's not something we're currently planning on. So those changes are rolling out. People will have seen that whilst we had to save that amount of money, we had some initial thoughts on how we'd organise it. We did a lot of community engagement, speaking to groups across London, to reflect on our initial thoughts on how to organise the resources with 7 million less. Those conversations with communities caused us to reflect on those plans and change them. So we, rather than having fewer counters that are 24 hours opening, we have more counters that are staying open, but for sort of 10, 12-hour days, etc. So we reflected on what communities valued most of all, but we've still saved the 7 million that we had to balance it. And the reason we're doing that is people use front counters less and less for all the obvious reasons about phones, etc. And it's very obvious what matters to most people is the police officers on the streets in their area. We've gone from, as I say, from 3,300 officers and PCSOs to 4,300 in neighbourhoods. I don't want to reduce that. I want to sustain that, because that's where they make a difference. And rather than chopping those resources, we decided the savings needed to come from front counters, which people use less.
Thank you. You're looking at the budget now for the coming year. Given how issues such as the front counter closures and the removal of school safety officers have landed with various organisations and the public, how are you going to ensure that there is going to be full transparency?
I think we've been really transparent about those changes all the way through. I think it's been as clear as possible, those changes. This year's budget, I'm not going to go into the details. We're in early conversations with, obviously, with the Mayor's office and with the Home Office. And hopefully we'll come up with a better budget this year that doesn't create those pressures. If we have more funding available, then that is likely to go into other areas rather than repairing those tough choices, because issues like neighbourhood policing, issues like reducing the abstractions from neighbourhood policing with our public order resources, issues like sustaining the resourcing to deal with an increasing amount of reporting of rape and sexual assault. All of those things, I think, would have a greater priority if we have extra resources available.
Thank you. I'm sure that you are as concerned as I am about the whole issue about court delays. Could you tell us what kind of impact those court delays are having on Met Resources?
Yeah, I'm very concerned by a range of things across the justice system. Backlogs and delays. I was just looking at my notes. We've got 1,034 cases already listed for 2028, 519 listed for 2029, and I'm aware of some cases now being listed for 2030, including one racially aggravated assault, which has been charged recently and is listed for January 2030. That clearly is completely unacceptable. I completely understand the government has got a difficult job repairing a sort of overstretched and struggling criminal justice system with challenges that are built up over a very long period. But we have seen the fallout onto police resources with some of the recent cases of mistaken releases. I'm also seeing, I'm concerned about tagging of offenders in communities. There's potentially over a quarter of those people on tagging orders actually aren't being tagged because the system isn't working. We're getting 150 tagging offences breached a week that we are having to round up people on. I'm also concerned about prolific offenders in communities where we can't get them remanded in custody and they keep a revolving door of offending being charged, offending being charged, offending being charged, and for bearing down on offences like street robbery. That's really important.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, and good morning, Ms Mayor. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Commissioner, you mentioned earlier that you had... Sorry.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry. You mentioned earlier that there was a £260 million funding black hole last year, and we've gone through a lot of the various tough choices. What is the current state of the shortfall that you're seeing in your budget?
So we have some estimates based on assumptions, depending on City Hall and government funding, but whilst we're in the early stages of conversation to start to set hairs running, I'm not prepared to put that out there.
Is it less than half of what we achieved?
It's not currently looking as big as previously.
Okay, but 259 could not be looking as big. I mean, we need to have some idea. We mentioned that some of these cuts have been made regarding efficiency savings and the need to save money. Pinner Police Station has been entirely staffed by volunteers for many years, but it is still being closed. What sort of saving is going to be made by cutting volunteer-based initiatives within communities?
The savings in those cases are clearly less, but there is still training and the physical maintenance of buildings, etc. So there's still issues there. So we've worked our way across the impact across London and come to the conclusion that the low usage of those premises, it's still better to close them in the way that we have done.
Okay, thank you.